I never thought betrayal would come in the form of a photograph. If you had asked me a month ago, I would have laughed at the idea. My wife, Sarah, and I had been together for 8 years, married for 5. We weren't perfect, but we were solid, or so I believed. I had always prided myself on knowing her, on reading the little changes in her mood, the slight hesitations in her voice, the way she would reach for my hand absent-mindedly while we sat on the couch. That's why, when it happened, I didn't see it coming. I should have. The signs had been there, small and insignificant on their own but damning when pieced together. A late return home from work, an unexplained giggle over a text she wouldn't let me see, an extra effort in her appearance on days when she just felt like dressing up. I ignored it all. Doubt, after all, is a disease. It starts as a whisper, something you brush off with a laugh. But it lingers, infecting your mind, sinking its claws into your thoughts until it becomes impossible to ignore. The truth came crashing down on me in the most mundane way possible. It was a Tuesday evening, and I was in my home office, going through some emails, when my phone buzzed. A notification popped up on my screen. Photos uploaded to shared album. At first, I barely registered it. Sarah and I had set up a shared cloud account years ago, a convenience more than anything. We rarely used it, but every now and then, pictures from vacations, anniversaries, and random snapshots of daily life would appear. I was used to these notifications. I almost dismissed it without a second thought. But something made me open it. The first few images were nothing unusual. They were from a professional photo shoot Sarah had recently done. She had always loved photography, loved being in front of the camera, loved the way a well-taken picture could capture a moment of perfection. The shots were beautiful, no doubt. Her makeup was flawless, her pose practiced, her smile radiant. But then, as I swiped through the images, my stomach tightened. At first, it was nothing obvious, just a feeling, a nagging discomfort. In one picture, Sarah was standing in front of a large mirror, her reflection perfectly captured. But there was something else, something barely noticeable, a shadow just behind her. It could have been the photographer's, but it felt off. I kept scrolling. Another picture. This time, Sarah was posing with her hands on her hips, looking off to the side. But in the background, reflected in a polished surface, was something I shouldn't have seen. A hand. Not hers. Too close. Too familiar. A light touch on the curve of her waist, fingers grazing the fabric of her dress. My chest tightened, but I told myself I was imagining things. It was probably just a trick of the angle, an accidental touch during the shoot. I tried to dismiss the thought, but doubt was already spreading like wildfire in my mind. Then I reached the next photo, and my heart stopped. It wasn't a pose. It wasn't planned. It wasn't professional. Sarah was mid-laugh, her head tilted back slightly. Her expression was different, unguarded, genuine, intimate. And next to her, partially out of frame, was a man. I couldn't see his face, but the way his body was angled toward hers, the way their shoulders nearly touched, the way she was looking at him, it was enough. Something inside me cracked. My breath came in short, uneven bursts as I scrolled faster, desperate for some kind of explanation. My hands trembled. And then, the final hit. It was a mistake. A photograph never meant to be uploaded. One she must have forgotten about. Sarah. Half-dressed. It wasn't explicit, but it was damning. The angle was too personal, too careless, too intimate. The kind of picture you take when you forget where you are, when you're lost in the moment, when you believe no one else will ever see it. There was no denying it now. No room for doubt. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I sat there, staring at the screen, unable to move. My mind raced, trying to grasp onto any explanation that could make this make sense. Maybe it was an old photo. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe. But I already knew the truth. She had betrayed me. The realization came in waves. First, the shock. Then, the anger. Then, something deeper, something worse, a cold, hollow emptiness that settled into my chest like a stone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone across the room, to storm into our bedroom, to grab Sarah by the shoulders and demand answers. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Instead, I just sat there, staring at the proof of her infidelity, my world unraveling one image at a time. I had spent years building this life with her, believing in us, trusting her. And now, in the span of a few minutes, everything I thought I knew had been ripped away. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to me? Had she come home to me, kissed me, smiled at me, knowing she had been in another man's arms just hours before? My hands curled into fists. She thought I wouldn't find out. She thought I was blind. She thought wrong. I wasn't the kind of man who let things slide. I wasn't the kind of man who forgave easily. She had made a mistake. And she was about to find out just how big of one. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my office with the door closed, staring at my phone, going over the photos again and again. Each time I looked, the pit in my stomach grew heavier. There was no excuse for what I had seen. No way to twist it into something innocent. It was betrayal. Clear. Undeniable. The house was silent except for the occasional shift of the floorboards, the sound of the wind against the windows. In the other room, Sarah slept peacefully. Oblivious. At some point, I stopped looking at the photos and started thinking. What had I missed? When had this started? I traced back every moment over the last few months, searching for the gaps. There were the late nights when she claimed she was out with friends. The sudden interest in working out more, eating healthier, putting more effort into her appearance. The moments when I caught her smiling at her phone before quickly setting it down when I walked in. It had been there the whole time, right in front of me. I had just been too trusting to see it. The sun had started to rise by the time I finally stood up. My body ached from sitting too long, my mind felt detached from reality, but I was clear on what I had to do. I walked into the bedroom. Sarah was still asleep, curled under the blankets, her breathing steady. I stood over her for a moment, watching, trying to feel something other than anger. Wake up. My voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet. She stirred, groggy, her eyes blinking open. What time is it? I didn't answer. I tossed my phone onto the bed. Look at it. She frowned, confused, but reached for the phone. I watched her expression shift as she unlocked the screen, as the first image loaded. Her confusion turned to realization, then to fear. Where did you get these? Her voice was quiet, almost shaky. You uploaded them yourself. I crossed my arms, my patience already gone. How long? She didn't answer. Her fingers tightened around the phone, her breathing uneven. How long, Sarah? My voice was louder now. Her eyes darted toward me, searching for something, sympathy, understanding, a way out. It's not what you think. I stepped closer. Don't insult me. She swallowed hard, setting the phone down on the nightstand like it was burning her. She sat up, running a hand through her hair, stalling for time. It was a mistake. I let out a bitter laugh. A mistake? I pointed at the phone. That's not a mistake. That's you with another man. That's you lying to my face. How long? She exhaled, her hands gripping the sheets. A couple of months. I had expected the answer, but hearing it still sent a fresh wave of rage through me. A couple of months, I repeated. And what? You thought I'd never find out? She shook her head. I didn't. Didn't what? Didn't think I'd notice? Didn't think I'd care? She flinched. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. She hesitated, her eyes glossy now, her voice unsteady. I don't know. It just happened. I clenched my fists. It just happened? She nodded, avoiding my gaze. You don't accidentally sleep with someone, I said, my voice low. You don't accidentally lie to your husband for months. That's a choice. A deliberate choice. She wiped at her eyes. I never meant to hurt you. I laughed, shaking my head. You never meant to hurt me? That's the best you can do? I was unhappy, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know when it started, but I felt disconnected. From us. From you. I stared at her, the anger shifting into something colder. So your solution was to sleep with someone else? She looked down, silent. I took a deep breath, trying to keep myself from completely losing control. Who is he? She hesitated. Who is he? The photographer. I felt my jaw tighten. His name. Daniel, she muttered. Daniel. A name I didn't recognize. A stranger. Someone who had inserted himself into my marriage, into my life, without me even knowing. Where did you meet him? At the studio. I nodded slowly. And what? You just decided one day that you'd start sleeping with him? It wasn't like that, she said, her voice pleading now. At first, we just talked. He was easy to talk to. He listened. I let out a sharp breath. And I didn't? She winced. It wasn't the same. I turned away, running a hand through my hair. So that's your excuse? I wasn't enough? I don't have an excuse, she admitted. I messed up. I faced her again. Did you ever plan on telling me? She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, no. There it was. The final confirmation. She had no intention of stopping. No intention of confessing. If I hadn't found those photos, she would have continued. Lied to my face. Slept next to me in our bed, knowing she was betraying me. I took a step back, my mind racing. Are you in love with him? She hesitated. That hesitation was enough. I nodded to myself, absorbing the truth. I need you to leave. Her eyes widened. What? I need you to get out, I said, my voice flat. Go to your lover's place, to a hotel, I don't care. But you're not staying here. She looked like she wanted to argue, but she saw something in my face that stopped her. Slowly, she got out of bed. She moved toward the closet, grabbing a small bag, stuffing clothes inside. I watched her, feeling nothing now. Not sadness, not love, just emptiness. When she was done, she stood by the door, gripping the strap of her bag. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't answer. She lingered for a moment longer, as if waiting for me to change my mind. When I didn't, she turned and left. The door closed behind her. The house was silent again. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where she had been, trying to process everything. The woman I had trusted, the life I had built with her, was gone. And now, it was just me. Alone. For the first time in years, I had to decide what came next. The house was empty. Sarah was gone. Her absence left a space that should have felt strange, but it didn't. It felt like clarity. The anger that had burned through me was still there, but now it was focused. I wasn't the kind of man to let something like this happen without consequences. She had made her choice, and now it was my turn. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. If Daniel thought he could take something from me, I would take something from him. I searched his name. It didn't take long to find him. His professional website was polished, filled with carefully curated images. His social media was public. He had followers, clients, connections. Photography was his business, his reputation was everything. I clicked through his posts, studying the details. He was a freelancer, working with models, influencers, and corporate clients. His biggest asset was trust. His work required people to be comfortable with him, to believe he was professional. If that trust was broken, everything he had built would crumble. I went to Sarah's profile next. She had kept our relationship mostly private online, but there were traces of me, a post from our anniversary last year, a picture from a vacation. Enough to remind people she was married. Enough to make what she had done clear if the right people saw it. I started collecting screenshots. The photos from our shared album. The timestamps. The interactions between her and Daniel. I compiled everything into a folder, making sure every detail was saved. I wasn't going to do anything reckless. I would be methodical. Precise. When I was done, I leaned back in my chair. This wasn't enough. Ruining his career wasn't enough. Sarah had chosen to betray me, but Daniel had known. He had known she was married. He had looked at my wife, decided she was worth the risk, and taken something that didn't belong to him. He had done it without hesitation. He deserved more than just professional ruin. I needed to see him in person. I found the studio's location on his website. He operated out of a rented space in a commercial building, open by appointment only. I checked his schedule. He had a booking listed for the next day. I had no intention of waiting. I left the house and drove. The streets were quiet, the city moving at its usual pace, unaware of what was happening in my world. When I reached the studio, the lights inside were still on. He was there. I parked and walked to the entrance. The door was locked, but a small window let me see inside. The walls were lined with framed photos. There were backdrops, lighting equipment, a workstation. And there he was, Daniel. He was sitting at a desk, editing photos, completely unaware that his life was about to change. I knocked on the door. He looked up, surprised. He hesitated before standing and walking over. When he opened the door, he studied me, trying to place me. He didn't recognize me. That made it worse. "Can I help you?" he asked. I stepped inside before he could react. He took a step back. "You know who I am," I said. His expression shifted. Confusion turned into realization. His posture stiffened. "Look, I don't want any trouble," he said. "You already have trouble." He swallowed, glancing toward his desk, probably considering if he should grab his phone. "Sit down," I said. He hesitated, then obeyed. He knew why I was here. "How long?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. I could see the calculations in his head, deciding whether to lie. "Couple of months," he admitted. The exact word Sarah had used. "Did you ever think about what you were doing?" He exhaled, rubbing his temples. "It wasn't planned." I clenched my fists. "You knew she was married." He nodded. "I did." "Did that stop you?" He looked down. "No." That was all I needed to hear. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a flash drive. I placed it on the desk. "Everything is on there," I said. "The photos. The messages. The proof." His face paled. "I wonder what your clients would think," I continued. "What the people who trust you would say if they knew the kind of man you are." His hands tensed on the desk. "What do you want?" "I want you to lose what you took from me." His eyes narrowed. "You're ending my career?" I nodded. He let out a bitter laugh. "You think that's enough?" I tilted my head. "Do you?" He didn't answer. He understood. He had made his move, and now it was my turn. I turned to leave. Before I walked out, I said one last thing. "You'll be hearing from me again." I didn't need to say anything else. He knew this wasn't over. Not yet. I stepped outside, the night air cool against my skin. This was only the beginning. I wasn't done. Not with him. Not with Sarah. They had both made choices. Now they would live with the consequences. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I sat in my office, staring at the evidence I had gathered, going over everything again. The photos. The timestamps. The messages. Everything was right in front of me, undeniable proof of what had happened. Sarah had thrown away years of marriage for Daniel, a man who had known exactly what he was doing. They had made their choices. Now it was my turn. I wasn't interested in an emotional outburst or a dramatic confrontation. That wasn't enough. I wanted them to feel this the way I had felt it. I wanted them to experience what it was like to have something they thought was secure ripped away from them. Sarah had betrayed me, and Daniel had made it possible. They deserved to lose what they valued most. I started with Daniel. His entire career was built on reputation. Trust. His clients needed to believe in him. He worked with models, influencers, brands, people who expected professionalism. The moment that trust was broken, his career would collapse. I opened his social media profiles again, scanning through his most recent posts. He had a following, not huge, but significant enough that his image mattered. His website listed his clients, his collaborations, the people who had put their faith in him. I compiled a list. Corporate clients, agencies, individual models, anyone who had hired him in the past year. Then, I drafted an email. Asterisk to whom it may concern. I believe it is important to inform you of the conduct of Daniel, last name. As a professional photographer, he has engaged in unethical behavior with a married client during a professional engagement. Attached, you will find evidence that may impact your decision to continue working with him. This is not an attempt to slander, only to inform. Asterisk. I attached the photos and the messages Sarah had exchanged with him. Nothing overly dramatic, nothing exaggerated, just the facts. I wanted them to see the truth and come to their own conclusions. I sent the emails one by one, making sure they went to the right people. Then, I turned to his personal life. That was when I saw something unexpected. Daniel had a girlfriend. I hadn't noticed at first. Sarah had never mentioned it, and I hadn't thought to check. But there she was, in his posts, smiling beside him, talking about their future. She had no idea what he had been doing behind her back. I found her profile, scrolled through her posts. She talked about love, about loyalty. She had no idea she had been living a lie. I sent her the same folder of evidence. No explanation. No warning. Just the truth. Then, I waited. It didn't take long for things to start falling apart. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A response to one of my emails. We take professionalism seriously. We will be reviewing our association with Daniel immediately. A few minutes later, another. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We will not be continuing our contract with Daniel. Then, I checked Daniel's social media. The shift was immediate. His latest post, a promotional shot for a brand, had new comments. Is this true? Unprofessional. Lost my respect. Guess we know how you get your clients. I refreshed the page. His girlfriend's account had gone silent. Then, I saw it, her latest post, a picture of the two of them, had been deleted. Then another. And another. I leaned back in my chair. His life was coming apart, piece by piece. Then, my phone buzzed again. Daniel. What the hell did you do? I didn't respond. He called. I let it ring. Then another message. Are you trying to ruin me? You win, okay? Just stop. I put my phone down. By the next morning, his website was gone. His social media had been locked. The damage was done. But I wasn't finished. Sarah had left the house, but she wasn't free. We were still legally tied together. She had been quiet since her last message, probably waiting for me to calm down, hoping there was a way to fix things. There wasn't. When she finally reached out again, she wouldn't like what she found. Sarah had been silent for 2 days. I had expected her to reach out sooner. That was how she handled problems, by talking, by searching for a way to soften things, to justify her actions. But this time, she knew words wouldn't be enough. I imagined she had spent the past 48 hours thinking of the perfect way to approach me, calculating the right balance of regret and self-defense. The waiting didn't bother me. I wasn't interested in her excuses, but I knew she would come eventually. She had to. This wasn't just a breakup. This was the unraveling of a marriage, a life we had built together. And no matter how much she had betrayed me, she still had to deal with the aftermath. My phone rang in the late afternoon. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring until just before it went to voicemail before answering. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, cautious. She was testing the waters, trying to gauge my mood. "We're talking," I said. "Not like this," she said. "Can we meet?" "Where?" "Our place." Her place. That was what she meant, even if she didn't say it. She still saw it as hers, still thought she had some claim to it. But it wasn't hers anymore. Not after what she had done. "Fine," I said. "Be here in an hour." I hung up without saying anything else. When she arrived, she stood at the door for a few seconds before knocking. Like she was waiting for permission. I opened it without a word and stepped aside, letting her in. She hesitated before walking inside, her eyes scanning the living room. I had already packed up her things. 3 boxes sat by the wall, sealed and ready for her to take. The framed photos of us were gone. Anything that had once belonged to both of us had been separated. I had spent the past 2 days erasing every trace of her from this house. She noticed. Her hands twitched slightly, as if resisting the urge to reach for something familiar. "You already," she started, but stopped herself. She was realizing, probably for the first time, that I had already moved past any conversation she thought we were about to have. She sat on the couch, folding her hands in her lap. I stayed standing. I wasn't going to make this comfortable for her. "You wanted to talk," I said. "Talk." She exhaled slowly, gathering her thoughts. "I know I hurt you." I didn't say anything. She shifted in her seat, uncomfortable with my silence. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to understand that I never wanted this to happen." I almost laughed. "You never wanted this?" I gestured at the boxes. "You made it happen." Her jaw tightened. "It wasn't that simple." "It was exactly that simple," I said. "You had a choice. You made it." She looked down at her hands. "I was lost," she said. "Things between us weren't the same. We weren't. Were you going to tell me, or were you just going to keep lying?" Her eyes flicked up to mine, then away. That was all the answer I needed. "You never planned to stop, did you?" I asked. She hesitated. "I didn't think about it like that," she admitted. "Because it was easy," I said. "Because you thought you'd never get caught." Her hands clenched. "You weren't supposed to find out like this." "But I did." She was quiet. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice steady. "Are you still seeing him?" She hesitated. "Tell the truth," I said. "No," she said. I didn't believe her. "Not that it matters," I said. "We're done." Her breath caught. "Just like that?" "Just like that." She stared at me, like she couldn't believe how final this was. Like she had thought there was still a way to fix things. "We built a life together," she said, her voice cracking. "You ended it," I said. "You made your choice when you decided I wasn't enough." Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. "I hate that I hurt you," she whispered. I looked at her, calm, steady. "I don't care how you feel." She flinched. I had never spoken to her like that before, and she knew it. She wiped her face, trying to compose herself. "What happens now?" she asked. "You move on," I said. "I move on. I've already contacted a lawyer." Her breath hitched. "So that's it?" "That's it." She shook her head, still processing. "Are you really this cold?" I let that sit between us for a few seconds before answering. "You don't get to play the innocent." She swallowed hard. "I know I don't. But we've been together for 8 years. That doesn't just go away." "You threw it away," I said. She pressed her lips together. "It wasn't just about him," she said suddenly. "It was about us. Things between us were different." I nodded. "And instead of talking to me, you went to him." She didn't have a response for that. She looked at the boxes again, her shoulders tense. "Can I at least?" "No," I interrupted. She blinked, surprised. "You don't even know what I was going to ask." "I don't care." She let out a slow breath, then nodded. She stood up, glancing around the house one last time. She reached for the boxes, but before she left, she turned back to face me. "I loved you," she said. I didn't answer. She waited, hoping for something. A reaction, a moment of weakness. When she got nothing, she nodded to herself and walked out. I closed the door behind her. She was gone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The house felt different now. The silence wasn't new, but it carried a different weight. Sarah's absence wasn't just physical, it had altered the very atmosphere of the space. Every room, every hallway, every corner of the house had once been shared. Now, it was just mine. The living room no longer had her things. The boxes she had taken were gone, leaving behind empty spaces where her belongings had once been. The shelves looked bare without the decoration she had picked out, and the coffee table felt emptier without the stack of magazines she always left there. The house wasn't messy, but it felt stripped down, as if something essential had been removed. The phone on the table was silent. The last message from Sarah sat unread, not because of any lingering attachment, but because there was no reason to respond. There was nothing left to say. She had made choices, and now she had to live with them. Whether she regretted them or not no longer mattered. Daniel's downfall had been swift. His online presence had nearly vanished overnight. His website had been shut down, his social media locked, his professional accounts abandoned. His name had been tainted, his career effectively ruined. His clients had distanced themselves, and his credibility had been shattered. There was no way to undo what had been done. Even if he tried to rebuild, there would always be whispers, doubts, and unanswered questions about his past conduct. It wasn't just his career that had collapsed. His personal life had suffered as well. His girlfriend had erased every trace of him from her own social media. The pictures of them together were gone, as if they had never existed. Whatever conversation they had must have been brief, because there was no attempt to defend him. She had simply moved on, cutting ties without hesitation. Sarah had lost everything in a different way. She had lost a marriage that had once been stable, a husband who had trusted her without question. She had lost the home she had shared, the life she had built. Even if she convinced herself that she had been unhappy before, she had to face the reality of what she had done. There was no undoing it. The divorce process had already begun. The lawyer had been efficient, and the paperwork would soon be ready. There were no complicated assets to fight over, no children to involve, no legal battles that would drag this out. It would be a clean break. A final, irreversible ending. Walking through the house, small reminders of her still lingered. A sweater she had left on the back of a chair in the bedroom. A half-used bottle of shampoo in the bathroom. A grocery list tucked between the fridge magnets. These were the last traces of her, things that had once blended into the background but now stood out like they didn't belong. One by one, they were removed. With every object discarded, the house felt lighter. It was no longer a space filled with shared memories but a place that belonged to someone who had reclaimed it. The weight of the past no longer held the same power. This wasn't the life that had been planned, but it was a life that could now move forward. There was nothing left to salvage, nothing to fix. The chapter had ended. The damage had been done, and now there was only the future. There was no sadness. No anger. Just clarity. Sarah was gone. Daniel was irrelevant. And finally, everything was as it should be.